Tindra Anderson here. With me, I have Brian Smith. Together, we make up the special care planning team for Mass Mutual Greater Houston. And we are so excited today to be interviewing Dr. Natalie Montfort. So we're just going to dive right in. Natalie, welcome. So
Hi.
Tell us all about you and your practice, because I know it's such an important part of what we do as well.
So thank you. Thanks for having me today. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I specialize in neurodevelopmental disorders. So those are disorders that are usually first diagnosed in childhood, like autism or ADHD or learning disabilities, but they persist throughout the lifespan. So here at my practice, we see clients as young as infancy all the way through the lifespan, up to senior citizens when it's a concern of a neurodevelopmental disorder.
Why would a family want to come and see you? Like, what would be some of the benefits, I guess, of seeing you? If maybe they've got a young adult on the spectrum, maybe someone who's 5-6 years old, they're kind of on the fence about it, whether or not they are on the spectrum or not. Why would they come and see you specifically?
It's a good question. And there are a lot of people that you can see, and different types of providers offer different services. So a family would typically seek out a psychologist when they want to have some assessment and treatment planning done. So what we'll do is take a detailed developmental history, review any prior records, work together with the client, whether that's a child or an adult, and the family members. So parents are always involved if it's assessment of a child. If it's assessment of an adult, oftentimes other family members are also involved to be informants and provide us with additional information to help, give us the good background information we need. We'll assess the way people think and learn, their academic achievement, behavioral, social characteristics, emotional characteristics, and be able to offer a picture of any clinical diagnoses that might be on board, and provide a roadmap or a treatment plan for helping improve the client or the family's quality of life. So sometimes people come to see us just because they need that initial diagnosis. Maybe development is going a little bit differently than expected. Sometimes a preschool teacher or an early elementary teacher might be the first person to point out something's a little bit different than with the other children in the class. Other times it may be, an adult who has felt like something was different, but they've always made it through okay, and they just want to know what might be going on with them, or maybe they've had trouble, especially with the changes we've had here in the economy recently, and were employed and now are having trouble getting new employment or had a break in a relationship. So we can assess for any difficulties or obstacles that they may be facing. And other times people come to us knowing they have a diagnosis, but needing sort of an updated roadmap or treatment plan. And just because someone has a neurodevelopmental disorder or condition like autism or ADHD doesn't necessarily protect them from things like anxiety or depression. In fact, it can make those things more likely to occur sometimes. So we may need specific treatment at a different point in life for depression or anxiety, when early on it was, ADHD was the focus of concern.
So one thing you mentioned, and we've referred a few clients to you, and I think it's really, really important for families to understand this, but I want to ask it to you so you can kind of explain it. So when you say update, someone, a young adult could be diagnosed, evaluated 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago. But when it comes to applying for benefits, they, want to get a more up-to-date evaluation, something that's going to correctly describe their situation for either SSI purposes, filing for RSTI purposes, whatever the case may be, Medicaid waivers. Does your evaluation qualify the satisfaction for families that want to apply for SSI, for example, at 18? If they were to go to you and get evaluated, would that evaluation hold up for purposes of SSI, qualifications?
Absolutely. And that's a great point. So evaluation data and an evaluation, it's really like a snapshot of that individual at that moment in time. So at that time frame where they were tested. And just like through the years, we all look different in photographs, same thing with the assessment data. So even if there was testing that was done 6, 7, 8 years ago, or particularly if it was done by the school district, those evaluations are going to be more focused on academic success or appropriate accommodations for the classroom. They're not typically going to cover the areas that might make work difficult, or reasons that, someone might have difficulty living independently, whether that's a permanent or a temporary situation. Those are the things that we need to address in this updated evaluation that's a more current snapshot for SSI or disability applications. So assessment data is really considered outdated after 1 year. And in the public school system, they'll reevaluate every 3 years. That's mandatory, but you can request a new evaluation every year.
Awesome. And so when you talk about working with families, is there a specific age that you focus on, or do you accept all families from all walks of life to come in and just at least get the initial meeting with you to see where their dependent or loved one with special needs might be?
Absolutely. So anybody is welcome to call. I have ventured into private practice during the COVID pandemic. So it's just me. I will call you back or email you back. But anybody's welcome to reach out. And if, this isn't the right clinic, or we're not close to home, or, if they need to go use someone on their insurance, I'm happy to provide any referrals that I can, or to help them find a provider that's right for them. But anyone can reach out. We'll discuss their loved one's needs, see if it is a good fit. We do see children here through the lifespan. So that could look like, toddlers for initial diagnoses all the way up through adulthood, but especially with that transition to adulthood. And it's important that whatever provider is assessing someone for the transition to adulthood phase of life, it's important that they see a lot of clients at that age. It is a unique stage in life. And we know sometimes when people have a disability, it may be chronic and lifelong. And we know other times it could be sort of an adjustment disorder. So it could be a disability that is temporary and associated with specific life stressors. So it's important to be able to detail that in the evaluation report, as well as talk about prognosis and long-term planning for that individual.
So you mentioned a little bit about the process in the beginning, but if you could kind of go, if you don't mind, a little bit more to detail around what it looks like for a family to come and engage with you, to have that initial meeting, the consultation meeting, and then dive into that process of building the plan, the meetings with you, gathering the data. Do you mind kind of explaining that for families, and maybe just build a little timeline around that as well for what they
Sure.
would expect from a time schedule to engage with you?
Sure. So families make the initial contact. As much as I like the work I do, it is frowned upon to solicit and just cold call people in this line of work. So families have to call us, or they have to be referred to us. That primary means is by phone or by email. Email is great because I can check that periodically throughout the day. Phones I check as well, but not quite as frequently throughout the day. Then once I return the call or return an email to families, tell them a little bit about the clinic and see if that looks like something they're interested in. If they are, we'll do a telephone interview. And that is at no cost. So we'll talk a little bit about what concerns they have, what help they're looking for, and we try to determine if this is going to be a good fit. And all of that usually happens within about a week of the initial contact. If it looks like we want to move forward with our work together, I'll send them some paperwork to fill out, to give me some background information, and then some procedural things to notify them and inform them of how their information could be used or shared, which at this clinic, it's very minimal unless we're required to by law. Because we don't work directly with insurance companies, we'd need a signed release to release any information to any other organization, unless it's required by law that we release it. So Once families complete that paperwork and submit it, we'll go ahead and get them on the calendar. And typically we book about 4 to 6 weeks out. So just a little bit of a wait. When it's fee for service, there often is less of a wait than using your health insurance. So that can be one of the benefits. That said, if somebody does need to use their insurance during that telephone interview, we can talk about it and I'll give them a referral if this isn't the right clinic or the right time for them. Once they're scheduled, they'll come in, and really the way I schedule, I devote the week to that client and that family. So we'll typically get together for our initial consultation, and that's about 90 minutes. Still doing some of those via telehealth, but also have the option to do them in person if families prefer. Given the pandemic, we've had to all become pretty flexible. So once families are in for that appointment, that's where we discuss the assessment plan in detail, because everyone's needs are different. There's no one size fits all assessment battery here. So we'll put that together. Families leave that meeting with a more exact estimate of what the assessment plan to answer their questions and gather the needed information will cost. And then if the family is ready, my plan is to work with them that same week. So we'll schedule the evaluation appointments. They'll come into the office. And if it's a young child, the parent may be in the room for a portion of that testing. If it is an older child, adolescent, or adult, the client comes in. We do some of the measures together, and most of them clients find enjoyable. So they tend to resemble kind of puzzles or games or brain games, things that you might even play in an app. Nothing too high stress. And we'll take breaks as needed. And the testing generally occurs over 1 to 3 days. So we try to meet the needs of the client. Some clients have busy high school schedules and they can do a lot in one day and prefer to power through it and get it all done. Other clients may have lower stamina, need more breaks, and maybe only work best in 2-hour appointments at a time. So we'll make that scheduling unique to the client. Then we gather any outside information. So we may have measures for parents, teachers, spouses, depending on the life stage of the client, to fill out and complete. And that data usually comes back within about 2 weeks. Once all the data is in, we get everything scored, and we can meet for a feedback session to discuss the results with the family at that point in time. It usually takes about 30 days to produce a report. The reports and treatment recommendations are one of the main reasons people might come see us. Our reports are very comprehensive and recommendation heavy. So everything we write is tailored to that client. We've worked with families out of the city or out of the state. And so we take all of that into consideration when making the treatment recommendations as to what's going to be most appropriate for that family.
That's awesome. I do want to say we've had some clients use you in the past for evaluations and reports for SSI purposes, and very, very detailed, very, very beneficial for those clients to get them through the process faster with Social Security. Everyone knows they're a headache. So I do want to say kudos to your reports and your evaluations. They do work very, very well. Don't leave any gray area, which I appreciate. You've mentioned a little bit about the insurance, and this will be the last question. Do you mind kind of explaining how families would engage with you from a pay perspective?
Absolutely.
Pay or insurance?
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to share one of the neat things that I don't think we've gotten to show you yet. So there was a piece of data that I felt was lacking. And this is, there are individuals who appear to have good intellectual functioning. Maybe they've gone to, regular education classes. They've even completed some college, but they really have trouble working and living independently. Typically, this may apply to clients on the autism spectrum. So their data can look quite good, but in reality, they can have difficulties. We kind of refer to this as an invisible disability. So we've partnered with a local organization that does direct vocational testing. And the vocational testing that is made available to psychologists is often, inventories of what someone likes and dislikes, what they think they're good at and not good at. And it's not particularly helpful or useful for this purpose that we're talking about. So we have the option with some of these clients to also have them do some testing at an on-site replicated job lab. So they'll go through potentially hundreds of tasks, sorting and filing and computer work and building, and we'll be able to see where they have deficits. Just because they can spell well and have intact intellectual ability doesn't necessarily mean that they can file. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they can file at what we call a competitive rate, where someone in the industry would want to hire them.
Right.
So that can help us determine if, we need to have more supports, more job training, more things in place for that individual in the work world.
That's awesome.
And so that's a neat new development. But to get to your question about insurance and fees, so I am a fee-for-service clinic, and that's just because being small scale, that's really the easiest thing to do. It's a full-time job and team of people usually to help file insurance. Mm-hmm. And when we file with insurance, one of the downfalls is that the insurance company dictates the hours of testing. The insurance company tells you what they will and won't pay for. So it's limited because the insurance company doesn't know the client that's come into the office. And so they may not be, viewing the case on the same scope that we are. And fee for service allows us to be able to assess all of those areas and not be limited by the insurance structure. Now, that said, most of our families do receive some insurance reimbursement for their services that they've received with us. So before we get into the process, we have some paperwork that we can share with families that tells them how to navigate their insurance, gives them some questions to ask so they can call and know what to expect before they've had their appointment here. And I think that's important because we don't want any surprises. So every insurance company is different, and I'll help to the best of my abilities and within the bounds of the law. You'd be surprised what some people ask you to do so that families can get as much coverage as possible.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I don't want to spend too much time. I know you're extremely busy. Is there anything last second that you would like to add for our families? I think it's a huge, oh, Tinja does.
I have one question. So if families are wanting to get in contact with you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Sure. I don't know if we have a way to project it, but email is really the best way to reach me because, like I said, I can check in on that multiple times per day. And that is N Montfort, N like Natalie, and then my last name, MONTFORT at montfortpsych.com. And maybe we can put that up over the video. I don't know.
I'll make sure to put it in the post for sure.
Yeah, so email is by far the best way, but also phone, we'll list that under the video as well. And I will get back to everybody. So if a family reaches out and they didn't hear from me, something was routed to junk, something didn't come through, please have them reach out again.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you for your time.